Gang, what's up? Aaron here, Canadian Looney. Woo, you tell the truth about your Attorney General, they shut you down. Interesting. I'm going to kind of keep it short and sweet. We have our parliamentary budget officer who is on the brink of exposing a lot of the issues that we have without a budget from Carney and his Liberal federal government. Let's take a look. I'm going to keep it short and sweet. We'll catch you at the end. Enjoy this. These committees are always interesting. Let's go. We'll catch you at the end of the video.
Hey, that's something everyone can
has been
enjoy.
very customary in the past that PBO brings donuts for committee for his appearances. So, thanks very much. We'll start with Mrs. Block for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Good morning and welcome to our committee meeting today. I want to echo the Chair's congratulations on your appointment as the interim parliamentary budget officer. Of course, as you know, it was a Conservative government that created this office with a view to receiving that very impartial advice that you noted in your opening remarks. And I look forward to working with you over the next 6 months. And hopefully the Prime Minister will see this appointment as being very important and look to putting someone in place on a full-time, not full-time, but on a permanent basis. I guess I want to get right to some of the questions that we have based on the reports that have been released to date. Would you agree that with a clear definition of what counts as operating spending, it's impossible to evaluate whether the government is on track to meet its fiscal anchors?
I would say officially we're within the office. I don't know that the government currently has fiscal anchors, which of course causes the people that I work with a considerable degree of concern at this point. As everyone knows, the government did have fiscal anchors. The previous Minister of Finance had the fiscal anchor of ceiling of the annual deficit at 1% of GDP, along with a declining debt to GDP ratio. It's unclear where those stand. They haven't been reiterated by the current government, to the best of my knowledge. With respect to your point regarding the capital and the operating side, we haven't seen a clear definition of what would fall into capital and what would fall into operating. So at this point, it's impossible for us and for you as parliamentarians to assess the likelihood or probability of the government hitting any fiscal target.
Thank you very much. So do you have any idea of when the government will give a concrete definition of its spending criteria, what its fiscal anchors may be, so that you can do the very important work of monitoring the government's spending plans?
The short answer is no. There's a longer answer I can give to you if you have more time, but the longer answer is we're waiting for budget 2025 at this point. So traditionally what happens is all is revealed in a 400 to 500 page document. And at that point, we will have a clear sense of precisely what the fiscal anchors are. And if the fiscal anchor continues to be balancing an operating budget, hopefully at that point, there will be a definition of what that operating budget actually means.
Thank you. So if the government is impeding the PBO from fulfilling its mandate as a fiscal monitor without any fiscal anchors being identified, a budget that has not been presented yet, and it sounds like it's going to be pushed back even further than what the Prime Minister promised earlier, would you say it creates more uncertainty for potential business investment in Canada?
So the uncertainty is always elevated in a period of low transparency. That goes without saying, well researched and well demonstrated. And that's why the Parliamentary Budget Office was created and set up in 2008. So in these situations where, for whatever reason, there ends up being a gap in fiscal transparency, the Parliamentary Budget Office will not only point out that potentially we're operating with incredibly low levels of fiscal transparency, which will feed into business uncertainty, among other things. But the Parliamentary Budget Office can actually step in and try to alleviate part of that, which is why next week we're going to be publishing our economic and fiscal baseline. So a new 5-year forecast, our outlook on the economy, as well as our outlook on the deficit figures for the next 5 years. And hopefully that will alleviate some of the uncertainty.
How much time do I have, Chair? I have a minute and 15 seconds. So I guess my next question would be, if the government were to balance its operating budget, but continue to increase its inflationary spending, who ends up paying for that spending?
Well, there's only, I would say two things. So the short answer to your question is there's only one taxpayer. So the people of Canada work hard. They send money to Ottawa that all of you get to vote on and decide how it's going to be spent across the country. So if there's additional money borrowed, obviously it has to be paid back at some point, and the people of Canada are going to do that. I would also circle back on my previous answer with respect to the operating and capital budget. We currently don't have a definition of the operating budget, so it's purely speculation on anybody's part at this point. What would happen should the operating budget that has not been defined by the government be balanced?
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. Oh, yeah. Mr. Patzer, go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much, Mr. Jakes, for being here. Just wondering, has the government been consulting your office yet when it comes to the development of a budget for this fall?
Yes, the government did reach out to us. The Department of Finance reached out to us last week. We had a very productive discussion, although short discussion with them, with respect to some of their ideas around the operating and capital budget definitions.
There's a rumor that's hit the news here yesterday, today, about them delaying the budget possibly until November. Does that complicate things for you, or does that throw any wrenches into the gears for how you're able to do your job and be able to effectively provide that transparency for taxpayers?
The short answer is no. It doesn't. And in fact, I go back to that's why our office was created. If the government wants to take 10 months before they put up an Excel spreadsheet that indicates what their deficit estimates are for the next 5 years, that's great for us. And we will go in and we'll fill the space. And next week, you're going to see a 5-year forecast from us. And if the government wants to go 12 months without producing a budget, I would, as a citizen, I'd feel a little bit uncomfortable. As somebody who works in the Parliamentary Budget Office, I would say, that's great for us because we will occupy all the space that they decide to give up.
Interesting. Did you get a chance to look at the Liberal government's campaign after they were elected and formed government? Did you get a chance to look at the spending announcements, the promises, and give a costing analysis of that? Post-election, not pre-election, post-election?
No, we haven't gone through the platform. So as you may be aware, one aspect of our mandate is to cost electoral promises on the request of a particular political party. We did some of that work, as you can see on our website, for the Liberal Party of Canada. We typically do not circle back after the election to cost the entire platform, because usually there's a bit of space between what's in the platform and what ultimately ends up being implemented. And especially given the current period of uncertainty, we wanted to make sure that we were focused on what Parliament is actually voting on. Because once the election is over, our mandate is to squarely focus on the decisions that parliamentarians are making. So it's great to have something in the platform, and if y'all, boo, are not voting on it, it's from our perspective, it's a waste of everybody's time.
There was a request by the Prime Minister to Cabinet to find $25 billion in savings by this fall. How hard would it be for the government to find $25 billion in savings by the fall?
Yeah, I don't know. I work for the Parliamentary Budget Office, not the Parliamentary Spending Restraint Office. But The one thing I will say, so for the first 10 years of my career, I worked in the federal public service in finance, the Privy Council office, the Treasury Board Secretariat, and the Bank of Canada. I spent a lot of time working on restraint exercises. The timelines are tight, so you can certainly find money. The timelines are very, very tight that the government has in mind, and given the order of magnitude of funding that they're looking at, it doesn't mean it can't be done. It just means that, to the best of my knowledge, it is a significant undertaking. And potentially, I think the public service is certainly up to the challenge. But if you go back to the 2012 restraint exercise, I think in that situation, we had the 2011 election, Parliament came back in June, direction was provided to the public service at the end of June, and then we had a budget in March of the subsequent year in 2012. So in that situation, you were looking at around a 5% spending cut, as opposed to, I understand now it's 7.5%, going up to 15%. And in that situation, for the 5% spending cut, you were looking at 9 to 10 months. So you can do it, but it'll be tight for them.
Does it make it tough when the Prime Minister comes out and announces $13 billion in a new bureaucracy for a housing fund? There's $4 billion for Ukraine, $9 billion in defense spending. He just announced $9.5 billion more in Toronto here the other week. I mean, on one hand, he's saying find $25 billion in savings, but on the other hand, he's announced more than that in new spending. Like, I guess in November when you get the budget, maybe you'll get a chance to see how that's gonna pan out. But is that mixed signal make it hard for your office to find clarity and how you're gonna account for that?
There's time for a yes or no answer, so perhaps save it for the next round.
No, and you'll see we're tracking all these announcements, and we have, I would say the Department of Finance is very helpful in providing detailed information with respect to the spending over a 5-year period of time that each of these announcements are going to cost, and we account for all of it and we keep track of it. And you'll see next week with our updated economic and fiscal outlook.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Jansen, floor is yours, please, for 5.
Mr. Jakes, I really appreciate the fact that you recognize we are not all accountants here and that you're going to help us understand things. So in that vein, for regular Canadians, can you explain just in simple words, what the Liberals mean when they say they're going to separate an operating budget from a capital budget? Like, what changes on the books when they do that?
So to answer your last question first, the bottom line of the government will not change. So the international public sector standards that everyone uses to measure the deficit and levels of debt, that will not change. And the first reason that won't change is those are the accounting standards. The second reason is the ratings agencies won't let you change it. Like, that's the first thing they're going to go to. And if they have a sniff that somehow there's a change in presentation, you bet your boots that we're going to be paying more for debt pretty quickly. In terms of operating capital, again, we, on our end, we don't know what the government precisely has in mind. So there's been no backgrounder published on the website. In some of the communication materials, the government has mentioned the UK, the United Kingdom, who's had a similar system in place. In that situation, on the operating side, the UK includes the operating expenses that I mentioned earlier, so the traditional measure, in addition to other types of transfer payments. On the capital side, they include the traditional measure as well as transfer payments or money that's being paid out to third parties who also invest in capital. So in the case, we have a report that's going to be coming out on Thursday that looks at infrastructure spending. So the federal government transfers, I don't know, over the next 5 years, I think it's going to be over $100 billion to provinces, municipalities, and First Nations to spend on infrastructure. That doesn't show up as capital spending for the federal government, but it's actually resulting in building capital assets. So that's something that they could have in mind. I don't know. I'm not inside the tent, so.
Okay, so I guess the like your bottom line is debt is debt, right? If family takes out a loan for a new roof, it's still debt even if they call it an investment. It's and same for Ottawa. borrowing, it's still debt.
Yeah, it's absolutely still debt. I think the nuance, and potentially I'm hopeful, potentially I'm not naive, the nuance is if this is the new management approach for the Government of Canada, and every time they are making a new spending decision, they are saying, okay, is this going to result in some sort of productive asset that's going to provide a stream of long-term benefits, then that is certainly different than the way that the Government of Canada has managed its money up to this point internally. And if that's going to be the way that they're going to manage things, then I would hope that they would convey that and explain that to parliamentarians just by way of transparency, because you deserve to know how they make decisions.
Right. So thinking about this a little bit further, like if credit rating agencies or lenders kind of see the government starting to change things, like for instance, even just the budget date, making a lot of changes that way, and our debt climbing, but if Ottawa is just saying, oh no, everything's fine, could that hurt our credit rating or raise the cost of borrowing for Canadians?
I think certainly with respect to credit rating agencies, they have quantitative metrics that they look at, and they have qualitative metrics that get down to a question of credibility. And certainly, if there isn't a fixed budget date, the budget date is being delayed, the government is not publishing a medium-term forecast, then obviously it kind of eats into the confidence that one's going to have regarding, and especially in light of all the additional spending announcements, it could eat into the confidence that people have. But at the same time, happily, Canada is also blessed with the best independent fiscal institution in the world, according to the OECD, which means that if there is a lack of transparency in one area, we're in a good position to offset that. And I can say we meet with the ratings agencies on a regular basis, and they are very keen to receive our analysis.
So I understand then that your office is going to commit to publishing clear side-by-side numbers, right? Using the old method and the new one, so Canadians will really be able to see borrowing no matter what the government calls it?
Yeah, absolutely. What we've committed to doing, and what we committed to doing in the report we published in the summer, is we've committed to using the traditional measure. So the measure that everybody else in the world uses, and the Government of Canada has used up to this point, that's what we're committing to. We will see what the government incorporates in Budget 2025 in terms of the operating and the capital budget. And if the definitions they develop, from our perspective, are not helpful to parliamentarians, are potentially misleading, then we will not analyze that because it's not helpful. There are only 36 of us in the office. Our time is limited. Your time is limited. We shouldn't be spending time analyzing things that simply don't make sense.
And our time is limited.
Sorry.
Oh, yeah.
You know what they say, no budget, no problems. Maybe that's the way of a banker. Doesn't seem to make sense to me, never did, never will. Doesn't make sense to the parliamentary budget officer as well. Man, who runs a household or a government on no budget? Come on. Aaron, Canadian Looney, like, share, subscribe, get notified. We do live shows. I'll be speaking less in these videos because they cut you out when you tell the truth. We'll show the politics. You're smart Canadians that watch here. Try to bring along some naive friends that may be still voting Liberal and show them this. They'll figure it out. Canadians are smart, despite what Carney says.
Canada's broken because we're stupid. Okay? Canada's broken because we're stupid.
How many kids did you molest with Jeffrey Epstein?
More than just elbows.